Hi again. We're going to be discussing in this panel AI with very specific examples and a couple of real experts here about the way they change productivity, the way AI is used to in value chains, the difference it makes with these couple of experts. So Steve Jarrett, first of all, you're the Chief AI Officer for Orange. Pierre-Yves Calloc'h, you are the Global Chief Digital Officer of Pernod Ricard. So both representing two huge French companies in very different sectors. And perhaps, first of all, just to open the discussion, you could each give us an idea of just how transformative AI has been in terms of productivity, value creation, with and as many specific examples as you can give us. Steve, perhaps first to you.
Sure, and thanks for having me. At Orange, we have a target for 300 million in value. That's actual value generated from our AI programs this year. We're on track to hit that. Specifically, a lot of value there is in marketing. So improving the way in which we can target offers to our customers, that's driving a lot of uplift in revenue and retention of customers. There's also a lot of value in our core business. So we use AI to do predictions about the potential value of new investments in our CapEx. So we have fiber and radio all over the world in 26 countries. And so being able to predict the relative profitability of an upgrade or not has saved us an enormous amount of money too. And then there's many generative AI use cases that I can talk about later.
But that is a huge figure. 300 billion, you say, just from AI. That's how much you're earning. Pernod Ricard, how, very different sector, of course, very different industry. How have you used AI and how different has it made the company?
So we had the chance to start quite early on the AI journey because we started 5 years ago. So I usually say it's 3 years before ChatGPT. And so we decided to focus on a limited number of use cases at the core of the business. So Pernod Ricard is present in about 60 countries in the world, more than 200 brands. And we decided to focus on the sales and marketing departments. So we have also the marketing parts. And to give you a concrete example, we have more than 5,000 sales reps, which are in the field every day, visiting supermarket, bars, discos. And so every Monday morning, they receive a precise recommendation of, let's say, 27 outlets that they should be visiting this week. And this is based on about 40 flows of data. And this is where the AI is identifying patterns to identify the best outlets to go to. And in each outlet, they will have recommendations. For example, on this outlet, Havana Club is underperforming versus its peers. So there's an action here to register a new format, etc. And we've also worked on the marketing, something which is called the marketing mix modeling. It's, for example, the marketing director of Absolut in Germany want to invest in the best way her marketing budget of, let's say, 3 million euros during the year. And we have a tool which is processing 3 years of historical data of marketing investments and sales to the consumers. And based on that, the tool after the training is able to do precise recommendations saying you should invest, I don't know, 40% on TV, 20% in the press, 30% in social media, and 20% in activations in store.
Wow. So it takes out a lot of the random quality, I guess, of a lot of the work that had been done before. And maybe this is something you can explain to us now. Agentic AI is something you're going to explain to us, and perhaps you were just referring to there, Pierre-Yves.
Sure. So agentic is sort of the next phase in AI. The notion is that the large language model has some autonomy to solve a task. So instead of just asking it a query and getting a response, the notion here is that the model itself has access to some tools. One could be browsing the web. It could be accessing your email, accessing your corporate information systems. And so you ask the model, you give the model a task, and it creates a draft of what it's going to try to do. And then the next step is you evaluate the draft and you say, I really like this part, or this part looks like it's going to be too expensive. And then the model then goes off and tries to begin to solve the task in step-by-step process. And so the way we think about that at Orange is we ask people, what are the parts of your daily work life that you really love and that you want to be able to be more effective at? And then what are the parts of your daily work life that you really don't like to do, that are really boring, that we can try to automate? And so what we see is that this notion of having a draft and then having the agent beginning to take action for you works really well in a couple of domains. Software programming is an obvious one, where you might want to build a prototype. You ask the agent, roughly, this is what I'm interested in trying to do, and it gives you a draft plan. And then you say, okay, go ahead and try to build the first version of that. So this kind of very iterative interaction with AI, where it has access to tools, is really powerful. We also see, like you were mentioning, obvious examples in B2B salespeople, where you want to have a plan for how am I going to handle this next important meeting. And then the agent can also take the transcript of the meeting, it can do the follow-up meeting notes, it can really help this B2B salesperson focus on the part of their job, which is the building the trust and the connection with the customer. And we also see similar dynamics in customer care. So the idea that the call is being listened to by the AI system in parallel and prompting the human to give what kinds of offers might be appealing to the customer, what might be at the root of the problem. A very significant, surprisingly significant percentage of phone calls to our customer contact center are silence because the agent doesn't know what to do. Oh, wow. Or doesn't know what the answer is. And so if we can shorten that time, the customer's a lot happier, and the agent feels much better about the situation too. So the challenge with agents is that just like you see today in AI models, they make errors, they make hallucinations. And so the idea that you're going to delegate a task to an agent that is going to make mistakes is a challenge. And so you need to have a process to check the procedure of the agent and make sure that it's not going to make big errors or spend too much money and so on. And so that requires really good tooling. And that's really the state of the art.
To keep the human in the loop.
That's right. And to allow the person who's programming the agent to say, here are the points where you really need to check in with me before you take an action that might have all kinds of implications, or you might spend too much money. And so really this is all in the last few months, we're seeing developing solutions for this. I think practically for you in the audience, I think the challenge is most of the tools are specific to the AI model. And you don't really want to get trapped or locked to a particular AI model provider's solution. And so there are a few solutions that are cross AI model for this problem, and that's where there's a lot of really emerging, exciting companies that we're working with.
As far as for you, Pierre-Yves at Pernod Ricard, I assume then that you are constantly looking at new ways to use AI to improve efficiency. And tell us a little bit about the importance of doing things to scale in a company like yours.
Yeah, so the scale is something which is important because you have at the beginning a cost of a project, and in any company when you have a cost you need to find value coming from it, which can be growth, which can be efficiencies, etc. And initially the good news is that we focus on the growth element, so getting more sales, more efficiency from our marketing, and the scaling is what will give you the return on investment. And so tracking that from the beginning will be is extremely important. And first is selecting the use cases that will have a value when they are scaled. And then when you're starting with a pilot, so for example, all the programs we have started, we start usually with 2 countries to make sure that we learn from those before we deploy, but we measure the value all the time, so during the pilot, and it's only when we are sure that we are delivering in market operationally every day, every week, the value that we then scale, and this is when we get the return on investment. So usually it's after 5 to 6 countries that we get the full return on investment, and then every additional country is additional value that you get.
Because you can quantify it. You gave, for instance, Pierre-Yves, the example of your salespeople who will go to particular areas that were underperforming or where you feel you can sell more. Are you able to quantify the difference that that has made?
Yes. So there are different methodologies. So in a scientific way of doing things is to do what is called A/B testing. So you have, for example, part of the salespeople which are using the solution, some not, or you take two geographies. So it could be two similar states in the US or two sub-regions of France, and then you measure the difference between those the cases where the tool is used and not, and this is how you can measure precisely the value that you get from the project, and this is how you make the decision. And then based on that, after 3-4 countries of deployment, you know what are the variables. So whether you have the scope of products you are covering, the scope of retailers you are covering, etc. And then you can apply those metrics as a forecast to the other countries to decide whether you roll out or not. So for example, Lithuania doesn't have this kind of tool because the cost is too high versus the value that we get. So we need to make those choices like any company is doing on any project of investment.
So this, please.
I think that's a very important point. So if you're not convincing your marketing and sales teams to do holdout groups of, let's say, 5%, you're going to be flying blind. And it's a fight because they don't want to lose the potential incremental revenue from the 5%. But this is really important. That was really, for us at Orange, was really foundational to get the CFOs to agree with the business leads that this was a good approach. And now we have a really strong methodology that people trust, but that was not easy to do at first.
Was it because there was reluctance in terms of adoption?
Yeah, because the salespeople don't want to sacrifice the 5% that you're holding out for the tests because they want to hit their targets.
But the CFOs needed convincing.
Yes,
that was a struggle.
Yeah, they did. But the CEOs love it because not only do we have a methodology they believe in, but also we publish all of these things very transparently internally, and it creates this competitive dynamic between all of the countries. And so not only do you see which use cases work to replicate, but it also drives the right sort of incentive, the competitive dynamic between all of the business leads. Wow. But that took a few years to do.
Yeah, it took us 2 years to get to that same conclusion, I would say, and methodology, because we've done some test and learn. We've missed some projects because of that, and it's really important, especially when some projects are costly, to make sure that the CFO is on board and will validate the figures after, or decide that it's not working. And so, for example, we've stopped some projects in some countries because we couldn't get access to sell out data to consumers, or because the scope was too small. And so we've decided it's difficult to stop projects in companies, but we've decided to stop some of the projects.
Wow, and presumably the sky's the limit in terms of the application of AI to both your businesses. You mentioned marketing, other areas in which you've been able to deploy it, but presumably this is a very fast-moving area where you can only begin to imagine now how you'll be using it in 5 years' time. I guess that's part of your job.
Yeah, the pace of innovation is like nothing I've ever seen before.
And you've worked in Silicon Valley for 30 years, so that's saying something.
Yes, and it's both exciting and I think this test and learn approach that you mentioned is how we do it. We also look for teams and job lines that want to try and experiment. So software programmers is a really obvious one. We also see a bunch of opportunity in B2B salespeople, in legal, in finance, in strategic planning. These are people that when they have access to great tooling and they can see how much more effective it makes them in their daily work lives, it makes all the difference. And I think for the kind of culture change part, the lesson that we learned there was that you need to find the champions in each job line who can train their peers. Because it's much more convincing for someone who's a finance person to see from another finance person how it's changing the way they work. And we missed that at first. We sort of did this group top-down, fairly generic training approach, and it didn't work. And so finding these champions and really recognizing and rewarding them made a huge difference.
Because that enthusiasm must be contagious once it's set in. Yeah. Pierre-Yves, that's something you found as well?
Yes, what is extremely important is what you're saying, Jeff, is the adoption. When you are rolling out tools like an ERP or Salesforce automation tool, etc., a basic one, people have no choice. They use the tool or they cannot do their job. On those tools which are making recommendations, you need to get the adoption, because zero adoption is zero business impact. And so thinking about the adoption as one of the key drivers, in addition to the return on investment, from the beginning is key. And it means involving the right people, the ambassadors from the beginning, but also listening a lot to people that know about the business. One example, when we first deployed in Spain our tool for the Salesforce, people said, well, it's not working at all. I said, okay. It's proposing to go and visit a discotheque on the Friday afternoon. Nobody does that ever, because they're preparing for the weekend. And so it's a simple rule that you can add to a model, to the programs. And so all that embedding of business rules, of tacit knowledge, which is within the company but never written, is extremely important, because what we see from our experience is that you need to get to about 85% accuracy on the different recommendations, etc., so that people adopt them. Below that, they say, no, it's better the old way. And so you need to invest, of course, in the modeling, etc., but also including business rules, and sometimes over-investing on the user interface to make sure that people feel their perimeter, their environment within a tool that makes sense. So what we've decided is to over-invest on the adoption, and this has been key on all the programs that we've done.
So you've both spoken about this tremendous potential, not just potential, but actually what it's already changing to your productivity and your value creation inside your respective companies and industries. But as two huge French companies, let's talk a little bit now about being European. And are there particular challenges to do with that, given the lead that the United States and China have in these fields? And what single thing should the EU be doing to change what it needs to change or further AI adoption?
Yeah, so being in Europe and in France has some challenges. However, it has also some really good things. So initially, when we decided where we would locate the different teams, I was thinking of putting 50% of the people in France at the headquarters, and then putting some people in the US, China, and India, about 50%. At the end of the day, we are at 75% in France. Why? Because we have a great pool of talents. We have really good universities on those topics, and companies like Air France, Meteo France, etc., which have started really early and have created a pool of talents which have experience. And also in terms of the quality, we have some tests that technical tests that we make for the data scientists, for example. The average score that we get in France is 81. In the US, it was 37. It's also because it's a different market. There's a lot of demand in the US from the big tech companies, a little less in France. So companies like us, which are not tech companies, probably a little more orange, sorry. Companies like Pernod Ricard, which is not a tech company, can attract really good talents based on its brands, etc. But also we have created a critical mass around it. So I believe that in France we have some competitive advantage also because of the talent pool. There's also a great network of startups which are providing added services to manage the accuracy much better, for example, of the large language models. And that combination, for me, is also helping on developing new programs.
Steve, same question.
Yeah, for us, because we operate in 26 countries, the country-by-country difference in regulatory is really painful, and it makes our architectures very, very complicated to meet each of the security regulations from each country. So that's problematic. The Draghi report, I think, was very clear on that, and we totally agree with that point of view. I absolutely agree with you that the talent pool in France is extremely high. The education system here produces extremely talented, logical thinking that is at the heart of solving these kinds of complex problems. I think in terms of opportunity, we see enormous innovation in open source. Not just in open source models, open weight models from China and from the US, but also in open source tooling. And so as we think about how do we solve these problems that are sensitive, that are sovereign to the country or to the customer, having great open source solutions allows us to run it wherever we like. We can run it on a sovereign infrastructure. We have our own Orange Business as one of our business units. We have a great sovereign offer from there that runs in a French data center. It's all French employees. And with open source tools and models, we can offer a state-of-the-art solution. And so I think one of the things that I would like to see from Europe is the governments encouraging more contribution to open source, because it lifts all boats. It does also help people outside of Europe, but I think if
but it
Europe,
gets around that regulatory fragmentation.
Yes, exactly. And the state of, if you look at generally at the state-of-the-art systems and software, it's almost always open source wins, because you have so many brilliant people from around the world contributing to the problem. And so I think we really need to embrace that more in Europe.
Pierre-Yves, on that?
Yeah, fully agree. So all the examples I've taken are running on open source models, and I think this is one of the magic of today, is that you get models which we would pay licenses of up to 1 to 3 million euros if we were to buy them, which are open source. And even our data scientists, our machine learning engineers are contributing to those open source models. They are fixing some bugs, proposing new features, etc. And I fully agree that it's one of the elements that puts us at par with the US and China, for example.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for those insights into all things AI and productivity and value chains. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Steve, Pierre-Yves, thank you.
Thank you.